Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I'm Abdurrahim Green. You're joining me for the proof that Islam is the truth. And today I'm going to be talking to you about the stories of those people who heard the Quran. The age of Muhammad, may God's peace and blessings be upon him, was a time when the Arabs were at the peak of their linguistic abilities. Indeed, one of the finest poems ever composed in the Arabic language was done at the time of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam by a man who was contemporaneous to the Prophet. His name was Labayd ibn Rabia. And his poem, when it was recited at the marketplace at Uhaz, caused the Arabs to prostrate before him in admiration. And when this same Labayd began to hear the verses of the Quran, he embraced Islam and gave up poetry altogether. When he was once asked to recite some poetry, he said, "What? Poetry after the Quran?" Indeed, many of the Arabs entered Islam just from hearing the Quran because they knew that it was conclusive proof of its divine origin. They knew no man could produce the like of the Quran and its eloquence. You see, the challenge of the Quran was not to produce, as some people might suppose, an amazing piece of literature like Shakespeare or Shelley or Keats or Homer or any of these great literasts. No. The challenge of the Quran was something much more fundamental. Because the Quran differed in its very structure. The very structure of the Quran was different from anything that had preceded before it in the Arabic language. And you see, in the Arabic language, poetry falls into 16 different bihar. The word bihar means sea. Why? Because each poem moves according to a different rhythmic pattern. And then, of course, they have the speech of the soothsayers, and they have prose, and they have rhymed prose, and normal speech. So these are the forms of the Arabic language, yet the Quran, although it seemed to reflect some of those forms, it was none of them. It was unique. It was not like anything the Arabs had ever heard before. It did not fit into any of those categories, yet at the same time, it made sense, more than sense. It was the peak of eloquence. And this is what made the Quran inimitable. And so the Arabs, the pagan Arabs, who when they heard this message of the Prophet Muhammad, may God's peace and blessings be upon him, the message that they should give up the worship of all the created things. They should not worship idols, they should not worship people, they should not worship each other. Rather, they should pray to and worship only the one God. This was the message of Muhammad, and this was the message of all of the prophets. When they heard this message, many of them did not like what they were hearing. They started to rebel. Mostly the rich and the powerful people, because in their mind, it was challenging their self-interest. The Kaaba was the center of pilgrimage for all the people in Arabia. They used to come to the Kaaba, and a tribe that was in charge of the sacred precincts around the Masjid al-Haram, the sacred mosque, the Kaaba and its surroundings, was known as the Quraysh, and they were the most respected tribe in Arabia at the time. Indeed, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, may Allah's peace and blessings be upon him, himself was from the Quraysh. The Quraysh was a large tribe, and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was from Bani Hashim, which was a sub-tribe of the tribe of the Quraysh. However, the Quraysh collectively were in a state of despair about this message of the Prophet Muhammad. How can he make all the idols into one God? How can he make all of these into the worship of the one God? They imagined that if this happened and the idols were removed and the Kaaba was only to worship one God, who would come to the Kaaba, who would come to Mecca, who would perform pilgrimage. Actually, really what they had in their mind was their own material self-interest, not truth, not the reality of whether Muhammad was a prophet or not. This is not what they were interested in. In fact, one of the uncles of the Prophet Muhammad, he said, look, your tribe has looked after the pilgrims and our tribe looked after the pilgrims. Your tribe did this good action and our tribe did this good action. Now you say you are a prophet? How can we compete with this? In other words, he was admitting that his refusal to follow Islam was based purely upon his tribal allegiance. What a stumbling block to truth. What a disastrous path they were following. So they got together. What are we going to do? How are we going to combat this Quran, this amazing speech that enticed, that enchanted its listeners? So Alqamah ibn Abdul Manaf, he said in a gathering of the Quraysh leaders, O Quraysh, a new calamity has befallen you. When Muhammad was a young man, he was the most liked among you, the most truthful in speech and the most trustworthy, until when you saw the gray hairs on his temple, he brought you his message. You said, he's a sorcerer, he's a magician. But he is not. For we have seen such people and their spitting and their knots. You said he was a soothsayer. But we have seen those people and their behavior, and we have heard their rhymes. And you said he's a poet. But he's not a poet. For what we know every type of poetry. You said he was possessed. But he's not possessed. We've seen the possessed people, and he shows no signs of their gasping and whispering and delirium. O men of Quraysh, look to your affairs, for by Allah, a serious thing has befallen you. Well, the Quraysh didn't know what to say. They tried all types of different things. They called the Prophet a soothsayer. They called him a magician. They called him a poet. They called him possessed. But none of these things were sticking. People didn't believe it because when they met the Prophet Muhammad, they knew that he wasn't like any of those things. So what they decided was that they were going to tell the people the magic of his speech turned a man away from his father, wife, brother, family, and tribe. This is what they said. And of course, in a sense, that was true. In a sense, the message that there is nothing worthy of worship except the one God was something very revolutionary, very different. It was something that separated the people who worshiped the one God from the people who worshipped others than the one God. So this is their claim. This is what they decided to say. The magic of his speech turned a man away from his father, his brother, his wife, his family. And then Abu Lahab. Abu Lahab was one of the uncles of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And Abu Lahab would wait on the roadways into Mecca in the Hajj season. Now the Hajj is the pilgrimage, the annual pilgrimage. And that Hajj has been going on for thousands of years. Even before the time of the Prophet Muhammad, the Arabs used to make Hajj to Mecca. But the Hajj had become corrupted with idol worship over the years. But the people still used to come from all over Arabia to the Hajj, and this was the source of the wealth of the Quraysh, that of course they were so frightened that the message of Islam was going to destroy. I mean, as a side point, look how many people are going to Mecca today. They didn't suffer because of it, did they? Anyway, he went, Abu Lahab, and he used to go and warn people. He used to say, watch out. Be careful of this man, Muhammad. You know, he's my nephew. I know. Don't listen to him. He's got this speech that if you listen to it, even if you listen to it, you'll be fallen under its spell. Now there was a man. His name was Tufail ibn Amr. Now Tufail was the chief of the Daws tribe. He was the chief of a whole tribe. And he himself was a very distinguished poet. So he was an important man in society, the chief of his tribe. He was a poet, and he was on his way to Hajj. And as he arrived in Mecca, he was accosted by one of these Meccans, telling him all these stories, warning him, said, Muhammad this, Muhammad that, watch out for this man. He's so dangerous, you have to watch out for him. So this is what they were saying. Now I'm going to tell you the rest of his story after the break. Don't go away. Come back, listen to us, listen to this amazing story of Tufail ibn Amr and how he became Muslim by listening to the Quran.